My name is Zach Lim. I'm 19, a part-time barista trying to save for college, and I live in Columbus, Ohio. Most people describe me as dependable and calm, the kind of guy who holds the door open, remembers your favorite coffee order, and doesn't ask for much. I used to believe that if you love someone with your whole heart, things will always work out. But everything changed when the girl I loved most smiled while I drowned in fear. She didn't betray me in the traditional sense. She didn't cheat or lie. But she moved forward while I stayed stuck. And that's a kind of abandonment too. Before we dive deep, if you're into raw, emotional stories that don't sugarcoat the truth, please like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon. It helps more than you know. Ready? Because this one doesn't end with slammed doors or dramatic fights. It ends with silence and the kind of heartbreak no one sees coming. We were two kids pretending to be adults, living on love and adrenaline. She was 21, I was 19, and everything felt infinite. We stayed up late, watching horror movies, shared playlists, and whispered promises under cheap bed sheets. I knew she wanted to be a mom someday. She talked about baby names like they were constellations. But I never imagined someday would come in April. Quote, when she showed me the positive test, her eyes sparkled. I felt the air leave my lungs. She blossomed. I withered. She picked nursery themes. I Googled how to afford diapers on minimum wage. She posted belly bump photos while I practiced smiling in the mirror. I loved her. But love couldn't quiet the voice in my head whispering, "You're not ready. You're a fraud." I stopped talking about music. She stopped noticing. Quote, we shared a bed, but I felt like a ghost lying next to her glow. The betrayal wasn't infidelity. It was emotional misalignment. I started pulling away without meaning to. Fake smiles, late-night drives, sleeping on the couch. She found a thread of texts I'd sent to my cousin, saying I felt trapped. She didn't yell. She just stared. Eyes not angry, just shattered. That hurt worse. Quote, you say you love me, but you're grieving me while I'm still here. She didn't leave. I didn't either. But we stopped pretending. We went to appointments in silence. I started therapy. She cried a lot more. We're still together, but different now. Like standing in the same house, but living in separate rooms. I'm learning how to show up even while scared. She's learning how to hold joy even when it's not shared. Quote, maybe we'll make it, maybe we won't. But at least now, we're honest. This blueprint works because it builds tension not from big betrayals, but from quiet emotional misfires. The tragedy is that love wasn't enough to sink their hearts, even when they shared the same bed, same child, and same future. We were a young couple in love, me 19, her 21. Our world was cheap snacks, TikToks, late-night drives, and dreams of escaping Ohio someday. Nothing serious, nothing permanent, just youth and feeling invincible. We weren't reckless. We were in love. Or at least we thought love could protect us from consequence. Then came April. That 1 month changed everything. She got pregnant. We didn't plan it, but she was thrilled. Showed me baby apps, picked names, giggled about stroller colors. I smiled and nodded, pretending to match her joy. But inside, I panicked. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I pictured my strict Singaporean parents shutting the door on me forever. I imagined missing my college applications, my music gigs, the dumb road trip we swore we'd take. She grew a life in her belly while I watched mine disappear. The cracks weren't loud. They were quiet and constant. Her joy made my fear feel invisible. She glowed. I dimmed. I'd cry in parking lots, scream into my pillow, then walk back inside like nothing was wrong. I didn't want her to abort. God, no. I just didn't want to be here. Like this, right now. The betrayal wasn't cheating. It was silence, emotional abandonment. I begged her to see the storm in my eyes without ever saying the words. She asked me if I was okay. I said yes. But what I meant was, can't you see I'm not? The gap between us grew. She clung tighter to her dream. I slipped deeper into my dread. Eventually, she moved back in with her mom. Said it was temporary. We didn't break up, but we didn't fight either. We just stopped. Now we text logistics, doctor appointments, due dates. I'll be there for the baby. I promised her that much. But sometimes I wonder if I'll ever be a whole person again. She's glowing. I'm fading. And no one calls that a breakup. But it is. And this story cuts because it's not about villains. It's about timing, fear, and two people loving each other in completely opposite directions. One running toward motherhood. One grieving the version of himself that didn't make it past April. In the beginning, I trusted that love would solve everything. I truly believed we were unbreakable, that even if we made mistakes, we'd figure it out like we always did. I imagined us, years from now, laughing about how young and clueless we were, raising a baby together, and still sneaking in midnight gas station runs. That trust was my anchor, until it wasn't. The emotional starvation began the moment I realized I couldn't say what I felt. Every time she smiled while talking about baby names or future nurseries, I swallowed my panic. I didn't want to dim her light with my shadow, so I stayed silent. But silence has weight, and mine started to suffocate me. Then came temptation. Not for another person, but for another life. A life where I was still just a kid, not a father. I found myself scrolling Reddit threads about people who escaped young parenthood, imagining what it would feel like to just disappear, to buy a one-way ticket and vanish before responsibility locked me in. But guilt hit harder. Every ultrasound picture she printed, every baby outfit she picked, I'd smile, nod, and then quietly walk away to throw up. It wasn't just mental anymore. The guilt lived in my body. And then came collapse. I stopped pretending. I'd mumble cool when she told me about appointments. I'd zone out when she talked about diapers or cravings. I hated myself for becoming that guy. The one who couldn't show up, couldn't fake joy, but I didn't know how else to survive. I loved her so much I broke myself in half, trying not to ruin her happiness. But no one told me love isn't just about showing up. It's about being seen. And she never saw how scared I was. Every day felt like a performance in a play I never auditioned for. And the cruel part? The audience, my girlfriend, her mom, the world, they all clapped for a version of me that didn't exist anymore. Inside, I was already gone. And the worst part is, I don't even know when I stopped being him. It just happened. Slowly, quietly, permanently. The power dynamic between us shifted in silence until it finally cracked through words. One evening, she held up a pair of tiny baby shoes with gleaming eyes and said, "I found the cutest baby shoes. I can't wait to see our little one wearing them." Her voice was full of innocent joy, her world perfectly aligned with the future she saw. I nodded, replied, "Yeah, that's cute." Trying to match her tone while feeling like I was crumbling inside. In that exchange, she had all the emotional power, hope, momentum, certainty. I was just background noise in her glowing script. But weeks later, after enough smiles that felt like lies, she turned to me with frustration and said, "You never talk to me anymore." And that's when something inside me snapped. I answered, not yelling, just cracking open, "Because I'm terrified, and you don't want to hear it." In that instant, the dynamic flipped. Her joy met my fear head on. For the first time, she saw not a partner preparing for fatherhood, but a boy frozen in fear. The emotional spotlight moved, and she had no words. I wasn't trying to win. I was just drowning out loud. And suddenly, she had to listen. This story manipulates the audience not through deceit, but by pulling them into a slow-burning emotional unraveling where everyone looks familiar. Emotional sympathy is built from the start. not by painting the narrator as a hero, but by showing his quiet suffering. He doesn't cheat, scream, or abandon. He stays, even when every part of him is cracking under the weight of unspoken fear. That silent kind of loyalty, the one that doesn't come with praise, makes viewers ache for him. He's not angry, just quietly breaking, and that evokes compassion. The story lives in moral gray areas, which keeps the audience suspended in emotional tension. She's not a villain. She's just so overwhelmed with joy that she can't see his dread. He's not weak. He's just terrified, young, and trying not to ruin her happiness. This complexity ensures no one can point fingers too cleanly, which keeps engagement high. The shock isn't from betrayal or violence, but from the realization that someone can emotionally disappear while still being physically present. That's the gut punch. The slow fade no one notices until it's too late. Forgiveness cues are threaded throughout, like when he says, "I love her," or admits he never wanted her to abort. These phrases remind viewers that he's still trying, still tethered to the idea of doing the right thing. They're subtle emotional signals, asking the audience not to judge, but to understand. And then there's relatability, the strongest manipulation of all. Anyone who's ever been in a room full of love but still felt invisible will recognize themselves in him. He's the person who breaks in silence, who smiles while dying inside. The ones who never get called selfish because they never speak up. That emotional mirror turns viewers inward, making them ask, "Have I ever been like him?" Or worse, "Did I ever make someone feel like this?" That reflective discomfort keeps people hooked, because this isn't just his story, it's ours too. The pain we didn't explain, the smiles we faked, the dreams we gave up on quietly while everyone else celebrated. This story wraps all that in a soft, devastating truth. It doesn't scream, it whispers, and those whispers stay with you. The story is layered with quiet symbols that say more than words ever could. The cold apartment they once shared transforms from a warm space of dreams and laughter into an emotional void, a physical representation of how distant they've become. It's not just cold because of temperature. It's cold because no one talks, no one touches, no one sees the other anymore. Then there are the pregnancy apps, symbols of life, hope, and excitement, but also daily reminders of a future he never chose. With every notification, he feels her moving forward while he emotionally retreats. The car becomes his sanctuary, a metal box of silence where he allows himself to cry, scream, or just feel numb. It's a mobile prison, driving in circles through the same thoughts he can't escape. Thematically, the story explores emotional invisibility. He's present but completely unseen, trapped in a role he didn't volunteer for, too afraid to speak up, too loyal to walk away. The story juxtaposes fear and joy, two hearts reacting to the same pregnancy in opposing emotional tones. One sees a beginning, the other an ending. It delves into silent grief. He mourns his youth, his freedom, and even his identity while pretending to build a future. These aren't just teen issues, they're universal human emotions. Who hasn't felt unheard in a relationship? Who hasn't feared destroying someone else's happiness with their truth? Who hasn't loved someone and secretly wondered, will they still love me if I say how I really feel? These layers elevate the story beyond a teen pregnancy tale. It becomes a metaphor for emotional misalignment, for out-of-sync hearts, and for the haunting loneliness that comes when one person outgrows the silence and the other gets buried beneath it. He began as the dependable boyfriend, the good guy who always showed up, texted back, bought snacks during her cravings, and made her laugh when anxiety hit. He wore that identity like a badge, proud to be the one who wouldn't run. But when she got pregnant, that role began to quietly crumble. It wasn't just the fear of becoming a father. It was the fear of being trapped in a version of himself he didn't recognize. As she glowed with anticipation, he dimmed with dread. The moment everything shattered was painfully quiet. He sat on the bathroom floor, head in his hands, listening to her hum from the other room as she scrolled through baby names and whispered to himself, "You're going to ruin her life if you tell the truth." That thought didn't feel like cowardice at first. It felt like love, but over time, it curdled into something toxic. He stopped seeing himself as strong. He stopped seeing himself as kind. Instead, he became someone faking enthusiasm, faking readiness, faking peace. He wasn't lying to her. He was lying as her partner. The emotional whiplash came not from betrayal, but from pretending too well for too long. He watched himself become someone he didn't want to be. Quiet when he should have spoken. Smiling when he should have cried. Present but disconnected. That shift, from dependable to defective, cut deeper than any breakup ever could. It made him question his worth, his future, and his right to happiness. He began to believe that good men didn't crumble under pressure, that strong partners didn't want to disappear. So if he did, then maybe he was never good at all. That erosion of identity wasn't explosive. It was slow, like rust in the soul. And by the time he noticed it, he didn't just feel lost. He felt like a stranger to the person he used to be. The narrator never cheats, never yells, never runs, but he betrays in silence. His sin is omission, not deception. He doesn't lie with words. He lies by not speaking them. And in his mind, that silence is kindness. He tells himself it's not about fear, but protection. He didn't want to burden her joy with his dread. He didn't want to force a conversation that might lead to an abortion he wasn't ready to ask for. He didn't want to be the shadow cast over the one beautiful thing she was excited about. So he smiled. He nodded. He kissed her belly while quietly mourning his own future. His moral code is deeply emotional, not rational. He equates love with sacrifice, and sacrifice with self-erasure. In his world, being a good man means holding pain so others don't have to. But that distorted logic backfires, because in trying to shield her, he begins to vanish. His internal suffering grows into resentment, and his silence, once meant to protect, becomes the very thing that distances them. Still, he sees himself as noble, not cowardly but considerate, not absent but quietly loyal. And that's the inversion. He believes disappearing is a form of devotion. He thinks holding it all in is heroic. To him, love isn't about sharing truth. It's about absorbing damage without complaint. The audience might not agree, but they will understand, because most people have been there. Choosing silence because the truth feels too sharp, too selfish, too dangerous. This isn't the morality of a villain. It's the logic of someone who's scared, in love, and trying desperately not to ruin things by simply existing. And in that flawed, human space between fear and love, his emotional justification takes root. He may be wrong, but he's not heartless. And that gray zone is what makes the story sting. Because sometimes the people who hurt us didn't mean to. And sometimes the people we hurt never even knew they were bleeding. That's what makes his silence so devastating. Not the intention behind it, but the quiet consequences he never meant to unleash. His girlfriend becomes a mirror, not of who he is, but of who he thinks he should be. She's excited, certain, full of radiant joy about the future. And every time she smiles at a baby sock or shares a baby name, it's like holding a candle up to his shadow. Her joy doesn't comfort him. It magnifies his guilt. Her certainty becomes his confusion. Her bravery exposes his fear. She becomes the glowing opposite of his internal collapse. But later, someone else enters the frame. A quiet, unexpected mirror. Maybe it's a tired coworker or a stranger at the register who says, "You okay, man?" And for the first time, he almost answers. Or maybe it's the older guy at the car wash who casually says, "You know, it's okay if you don't want what everyone says you should. This figure isn't a romantic escape. He isn't exciting. But he's real. He's not selling dreams. He's acknowledging pain. And that's what the narrator needs. Not more future promises, but present honesty. His girlfriend reflects everything he's trying to fake. The stranger reflects what he's truly carrying. That contrast, that duality, reveals the narrator's buried need. To be seen not as the supportive boyfriend, not as the brave young man, but simply as someone scared and uncertain. The girlfriend pushes him forward. The mirror pulls him inward. Together, they expose the core of the story. It's not about being ready or not ready for fatherhood. It's about the quiet agony of pretending you are. He never wanted to run from her. He just wanted someone to notice he was limping. And in the eyes of a mirror character, he finally sees himself clearly. Quick pause. If you've made it this far, I genuinely appreciate you. This story isn't loud, but it cuts deep. It's the kind of pain that doesn't bring tears, just long, quiet stares at the ceiling when you can't sleep. So tell me in the comments, what country are you watching from? And what time is it right now? I read every single one. And if you've ever smiled through panic, nodded through heartbreak, or pretended to be okay for someone else's happiness, drop a in the comments. Let's turn this thread into a space for the unspoken. Because sometimes the scariest part of love isn't losing someone. It's admitting you were never ready to begin with. This story whispers what so many are too afraid to say out loud. For men, it unlocks a hidden door. The fear of becoming something you're not ready to be. The crushing anxiety of responsibility. The shame of not leaping into joy when the world says you should. It quietly tells them, you're not broken for being scared. It gives permission to feel without having to fall apart publicly. For women, it's a soft mirror, showing how joy can unintentionally eclipse another person's pain. It's not about blame, it's about presence. It says, maybe you didn't miss the signs because you didn't care, but because you were so full of hope, you didn't see the silence growing beside you. And for everyone watching, it pulls back the curtain on invisible grief. The kind that gets no sympathy because you're supposed to be happy. It gently tells us, you can be scared and still be loyal. You can love someone deeply and still not want what they want. And silence doesn't always mean weakness. Sometimes it's the only way someone can keep from falling apart. This story also delivers emotional justice, not through revenge, but through revelation. It gives a voice to the one who never screamed, never walked out, never betrayed, only faded. In a world obsessed with bold choices and clean exits, this story honors the kind of heartbreak that lingers in quiet moments, in unspoken words, in rooms filled with baby names and suppressed fear. It's about the emotional bruise that no one sees but never stops aching. It reminds the audience that not every love story ends with a villain. Some just collapse under the weight of expectations neither person knew how to carry. And sometimes the most painful goodbye is the one no one says out loud.